I'm tired. Alright, guys. Do you want to see a doubleheader tomorrow? Because I didn't do one today. I'll let you comment down below on that. Alright, boys. I gotta go. I got stuff I gotta do. So peace out, guys. This is it. This is the intro to the channel. Thank you for making this a reality. This is incredible. Alright, guys. We'll see you tomorrow for the live stream. Peace.
God damn it! Just fucking dump fucking pop all over the fucking table by throwing that stupid goddamn thing in. Mark, he's 4 years old.
Sorry if you heard that in the background. My dad's a little mad right now.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In this episode, we're looking at 14-year-old Harley Dilly from Port Clinton in Ohio, a small rural town of about 6,000 people. If you listen to Harley's voice, it really personalizes who he was and what was kind of going on and the kind of vibe and mindset that he was in. And you can kind of hear that he was quite a talkative, upbeat guy, but that there were also other things going on. And we can see from his YouTube channel that he was, into gaming, and that he was also interested in his social currency online. He says at one point that he wanted to get his subs to 1,000 before the end of the year. And I must say that made me feel quite sorry for him. Just that, you were this little kid, and that's sort of what he's doing. I mean, I don't know why I felt sorry for him, but it just made me think about it in a weird way, just because I'm also doing something similar to it, but it's a little bit different. He's a kid, and he can kind of be carefree about stuff, and he's already caught up in this whole maelstrom. So I don't know why, I just felt quite sorry for him. And then so in this episode we're really going to be looking at this through 4 dimensions. 1, the 14-year-old YouTube creator. 2, family dynamics. 3, the chimney. And 4, the motive. Now, in terms of number 1, this is really dealing with who is this kid, who is this 14-year-old, and the answer is his identity is basically he's this YouTube creator. That was something that really surprised me. I was surprised that kids are starting with YouTube so young. I mean, I'm in my 40s, and it's kind of new to me, and this is kind of looks like it's something that is typical now with kids. So it's now a normal thing for kids to record themselves and to put themselves on the spot, and deal with the criticism that necessarily comes with that, and deal with the hamster wheel that necessarily comes with that. And you can see from his profile that he had around about 400 subscribers. It's not clear whether that was the exact number when he disappeared, but that number has sort of jumped to over 3,500. And the title of his channel, Harley Dilly 2.0, is just so ironic and sad, just given that he's not here to see it. And Harley Dilly 2.0, it's almost like the life after death of Harley Dilly. And as I said, he's not here. And although his voice speaks for him, one wonders whether it is speaking eloquently enough and accurately enough, one wonders whether what people are thinking about him is the kind of thing that he would agree with if he were here. So something that disturbed me as a true crime writer was this sort of gravitation quite early on to, was it because this kid was active on social media that someone wanted to exploit him, and you can tell where this is going. It's already going to like a pedophile abduction kind of thing. And this is the result of years of mind-addling bullshit from the John Benet Ramsey case and the MCCANN case. Just kind of the go-to thing for people. People think as soon as a child disappears, they've been abducted by a pedophile. And I don't think that should be the first thing that people think, but it is. If we go to the next slide from the register, it refers to what happened to the daughter of the founding director, I think, of EcuSearch, Tim Miller. She was abducted and murdered in North Galveston. And so, obviously, whenever someone disappears, I don't know if it's possible for this guy to think of something that doesn't involve foul play, with the result that if you go and investigate every single case as a possible abduction, when it could be as straightforward as what happened in this case, then you are going to end up with unhappy results every single time. And you have a similar situation with Nora Corrin, where, the Madeleine McCann case was completely conflated with that situation, and it turned out the French-Irish girl was simply walking around on the outside of the hotel for days on end, and then eventually starved to death because everyone was looking for an abductor. So this obsession with abductions and pedophiles has really got to stop. If there's an abductor, then there is probably some evidence of an abductor or someone that someone has seen lurking around the neighborhood. But without evidence of that, that shouldn't be the first port of call. And this guy Raider in this article talks about some kids running away. We're not even sure if that did happen. I mean, I don't think Harley Dilly would run away to a house across the road. It's possible that he was just not wanting to go to school. It's also possible that he wasn't happy with things at home. Maybe he wanted to hang out in the house sort of over the holiday. I don't know. But we will deal with his motive in the fourth and last point of this, and where the motive leads one. So what I think is very helpful in the Harley Dilly case is the way that people are looking at the family dynamics from the outside in. In other words, from the perspective of what was the situation like at home? What was his home life like? How did his parents treat him? How happy was he? What was kind of going on? What's the vibe at home? And what that is acknowledging is kind of a very obvious point, which is that the dynamics matter when something happens to a person. And I don't really believe that this was an accident, in the sense that, it is an accidental death. So technically that is true. But I don't believe that any death is truly accidental. Accidents don't just happen. Accidents aren't accidental, right? I've got to be careful saying that, because it doesn't mean the opposite either. It doesn't mean that Harley died because someone killed him. He died because he got into that chimney. But there are factors around that. There are sort of a cloud of factors around that are nudging him in one way or another, and that is worth acknowledging. So when you look at, again, this article from the Register, it refers to him being angry at his family. and that is just acknowledging the potential situation with the family dynamics. One thing that surprised me with his family were the messages on social media. The fact that his mother said in the second line, regardless of what anyone thinks about us, Harley is missing. It is a bit strange that they are quite concerned about what people think of them when you would expect anyone to be totally worried about their child. So that is cause for concern, and so is just, why aren't you looking for your child when you could have been, instead of writing this long message, why aren't you out there thinking about it or whatever it is? I believe the police said to them, we don't need you to look, we will look, or something like that, which is for me a bit unfathomable. Even if it's true, wouldn't you go and look next door? I mean, isn't that the most obvious place to look? And I do think and this is where I'm critical of missing persons investigations, all of them. I'm talking about Casey Anthony, Madeleine McCann, John Benet Ramsey. Whenever a child disappears, you should be looking for them right in their neighborhoods first. You should start in the house and then do a perimeter that goes wider and wider, and then check residences in order to exclude them. And every single time you seem to have a situation where the last place everyone looks is the first place anyone would look, which is start in the home and then look right next door. And so much time has gone by and has been wasted in so many cases. The Madeleine McCann case, if they just brought the cadaver dogs in right in the beginning, which they did with the Chris Watts case, right in the beginning, instead of waiting 3 months. In the Casey Anthony case, anyway, I think you get the point that I'm making. In future, when a child goes missing, look for the child. Don't look for an abductor. Look for the child and start in the house, and then you make a perimeter search, house by house, in that kind of perimeter. And if they'd done that, if the police had done that, who knows what would have happened. Obviously, what I'm saying is with the benefit of hindsight, but it's also the same thing that has happened in cases that are 12 years old. We've known about that for a long time. And so, once again, people are making this mistake. And the whole idea is, let's not keep making this mistake. But what I appreciate with the Harley Dilly case is it acknowledges the importance of family dynamics. And in the Chris Watts case, people don't want to do that. People don't want to acknowledge the family dynamics. People don't want to talk about what was the relationship like between husband and wife. They said, no, it's irrelevant. If it's irrelevant there, why is it so relevant here with a child? What happened to the child? It's always relevant. It's far more relevant in the in a family situation where a family member comes to grief, especially when it's caused by another family member. Then family dynamics are absolutely pertinent. But one's got to be careful between just acknowledging family dynamics and starting to point a finger. When you acknowledge the family dynamics, you're simply saying, this is the dynamic within the family. Now I understand kind of how people were feeling about one another. You don't necessarily have to accuse anyone of anything. You're simply saying, this was the social situation. This was the level of happiness within the family. These were the various dynamics between the various family members. So it's always good to be aware of them. But one's got to be careful saying that doesn't necessarily mean someone was at fault. You need a lot of information before you can make that assessment. And that brings us to point number 3, the chimney. The chimney really sticks out in the home that was next door. It kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It's bright. It looks quite new. It looks like something out of a computer game, doesn't it? I mean, it looks very neat and almost unreal. It's so neat. And on a TV channel that sort of described the interior of the chimney, and it refers to a 9-inch by 13-inch opening. And what's interesting with that is, if you think about the thief hatch in which the watch children were pushed, that was only 8.5 inches wide. This one is 9 inches by 13. But the point is, on the one end, it was actually almost as narrow as the thief hatch. And this little boy, 14, he was 10 years older than Bella, actually managed to get himself into this opening. Basically, I think what he was anticipating was that he would be able to drop down. This opening would allow him to sort of not fall through, but drop. Gravity would pull him slowly downwards, and he would be able to emerge at the bottom through the same sized opening. But then what he didn't anticipate was at the bottom, just in a typical situation, at the bottom you would have a chimney flue, which is sort of a kind of a compartment, but kind of a narrowing to this tunnel, and this narrowing would only be 6 inches wide. And when you consider that, then you can see how Bella and Cece were pushed through a circular opening of 8.5 inches, and they were very small little children. This is 6 inches. That is just simply too narrow. And the only way this little boy could have possibly gotten through there is if he'd found some way to sort of stomp through that one sort of ledge. But you can kind of imagine he wouldn't be able to move much in that space, even if that is what he was trying to do. And it would take a really long time, even if he was aware of the situation he was in. He was probably in a situation where he couldn't necessarily see. It may have been pitch dark. I don't know whether he would have used his phone to illuminate, but the bottom line is he wouldn't have been able to go back up the same way, just because it was too tight a space. And so how I understand what happened to him was he found himself in this space. I think he got very probably claustrophobic, got very started to panic, tried to remove his clothing, probably for two reasons. One is to let other people know he was there, but also so that there was more space for him to get through this very narrow hole, and found that wasn't working. And probably he shouted through the chimney, but the sound would then just conduct directly upward. And then there was the issue of, his only way out was through that narrow 6-inch opening, the way that he saw it. He couldn't go back up the same way. It was just impossible to get any purchase. Just too high to go back up and too narrow for him to sort of be able to wedge himself, and get him. And that must have been very traumatic, that realization, knowing that he was trapped. And so I think the compressive asphyxiation happened when he, in just a moment of tragic desperation, tried to get out of that opening through the bottom. It would have been very tempting because there was probably a little bit of light coming through that opening, and also that was the way out to freedom and for him to be able to continue being alive, for this 14-year-old child to continue living out the rest of his life. That little opening represented hope and rescue and resurrection, basically. And so he wasn't just going to stand there and die. He wanted to try. He wanted to try and get through. and each time he tried to go through and his route was blocked, he probably felt, well, maybe if I just push harder, and then he would not be able to get through again, but then there was no other way out again. And it's just a really horrible thought just to think what situation he was in. And then ultimately it does appear that he got stuck in this space and, was obviously weakened and exhausted and couldn't wriggle back out. And that is what cost him his life. So in terms of motive, I don't want to conflate this with true crime. It isn't actually a crime. Somebody did die, but I don't think there's a criminal element to it. As I say, what got my attention in terms of this case was the last line of an article on CNN where it said, it's not clear why the boy may have tried to enter the chimney. And for me, I kind of had two gut feel responses to that when I read it. The first one was, we know when this incident happened. It happened on the 20th of December, so kind of slap bang in the middle of Christmas. And what's Christmas all about? It's about the narrative of Santa Claus, entering a house through the chimney. So that those images and those thoughts would certainly have been in play potentially at that time of the year more than at any other time, right? I'm not saying that this is definitely the case with Harley. I'm just saying the timing of when this happened and what everybody knows about Christmas and the whole mythology of Santa entering the home through the chimney may have been something that played with this young boy's imagination. So that was the thing that occurred to me first without any knowledge about the case. And then I went and checked, when he disappeared, and it was the 20th of December. It was 5 days before Christmas. And I thought that was very, very relevant. I then, obviously, in preparation for this video, I went and just looked at more information, what was he interested in, and it turns out he was interested in this game Fortnite, and Fortnite's all about, hunting for treasure chests in all sorts of locations, and all of these locations are kind of abandoned structures. It might be the back of a factory or a garbage truck or somewhere in a building, up 2 flights of stairs, or restroom somewhere, or anyway. So it was in abandoned structures that his game would lead him to, finding things. And one of the aspects, as I'm sure a lot of you already know, is something at the very top of the chimney. And I don't know whether he wasn't more tempted just to go to the top of the chimney, and that was really what he wanted to do. In other words, him climbing up the tower to get to the chimney wasn't so much because he wanted to get into the house. It was more just because he was in kind of the gaming mode. And I've been there myself. There was a stage where I played a lot of Need for Speed. And you play and you play and you play, and then you get in your car and you find yourself in similar situations of going around a bend or whatever, and just that whole gaming instinct almost comes back. So him climbing up the tower and wanting to look at the chimney may have just been to address his curiosity, his imagination. And if you look at the chimney in the game scenario, you look at the chimney in this actual house, they've got the same sort of design. They look quite similar. And so maybe he was just tempted by curiosity and he just wanted to look into the chimney or something like that. He just wanted to manifest the excitement of the game in his kind of boring humdrum life. That's the impression that I got. And so maybe that was also reinforced by, because Christmas cards or the Christmas scenario of Santa getting into a chimney or something like that. Maybe not even from that Christmas, maybe from his distant childhood, or maybe one of his younger siblings mentioned it. How is Santa going to come into our house, for Christmas, and all that kind of interest. And then maybe someone said, well, he's going to come through the chimney, but our house doesn't have a chimney. But anyway, the seed for that idea, the seed for that thought did come from somewhere. And I want to just address the feelings that the neglect of the parents are an issue and all that kind of thing. My response to that is simply, this child didn't die in his home. And so, in terms of criminal neglect, as is the case that's been brought up with both the Ramseys and Madeleine McCann, that doesn't apply here. It simply is not applicable. He was on his way to school, and so the fact that he decided to not go to school, and this was between 6 and 7 a.m. in the morning, I think it was the last day of school as well. The fact that he elected not to go is his decision. And so if you're going to say the dynamics around him had a lot to do with why he did what he did, I don't think that's not true. I think the dynamics did play into his mood and into kind of the person who he was becoming, and why he may have been impulsive, and why he may have been bored or not wanting to go to school, or whatever the case may be. I don't really get the feeling that he wouldn't have wanted to go to school. I think the gaming psychology kicked in, and he wasn't really thinking completely straight, as some 14-year-olds don't. They get ideas into their heads and they follow them. So I would put the motive at poor impulse control, impulsivity, the whole Christmas thing that was happening, and also that sort of temptation. It's the last day of school. It's about to be holidays. I want to start having some fun. I want to impulsively do something, that is not school. And if you compare that to the Watts case, it's the same kind of thing. It's the last day. Shanann's about to come home, and what is going to happen to the prestige of the family if the world finds out that he's been cheating, or they get a divorce, or they have to sell the house and there's alimony and all that kind of thing. So what I also want to compare here is the prestige and the treasure involved in gaming in terms of very young children. Very young children, young boys, it is important to them that they are seen by their peers to be not necessarily leaders, but having social currency. They want to be thought well of by their friends, and they want to be part of a group, and they want to be acknowledged as strong or clever or whatever the case may be. So social currency matters, and they get some of that through gaming. This whole thing about running after treasure is also a way that they gain kind of a level, or they gain something. They gain kind of a sense of enrichment, right? Which is symbolized by these sort of chests that are all over the place. And so him going to the chimney was symbolic of that, even though it was in the real world. It was nevertheless symbolic. And in the Watts case, I really believe Chris Watts committed the murders first and foremost, not so much because of the family dynamics, even though that was a factor, not so much because of the affair, even though that was a factor, but because of the treasure. If the house was sold, he wanted all the money. He needed all the money. And so he was also motivated by social currency and prestige in the sense of actual money. Actual money translating to him being, able to be in a relationship with someone, able to afford that and all that kind of thing. So what I'm trying to do is compare the value of money in the Watts case to the social prestige of, being able to tell his friends that he climbed a chimney, or just having that sense himself that he'd accomplished a sort of gaming milestone, but in the real world, something that he'd maybe seen many times, and now he was challenging himself. And that it went from that to climbing into the chimney. We don't know whether he'd done that before. Maybe he had climbed up the building and now this is the next step in that thing. So that's the one aspect to address. The other aspect in terms of motive is, if you think about neglect, you say, well, he went to the house because he felt neglected. First of all, I don't think he's a very different teenager to so many teenagers out there. Many are neglected. Many who play computer games want to be neglected. They want to be left alone. They're in their own little worlds. And neglect is kind of the currency of our time. A lot of us are neglected. A lot of us neglect ourselves. So that doesn't, to me, really hold up. There may be a stronger case to be made about that, but I really don't think you can take it to a criminal level, and I don't think you should. I don't think there's anything wrong with the parents talking to the police and the police talking to the children, their younger children, and just making sure that everything is the way it should be. I don't see anything wrong with that, but I don't think it needs to go any further than that. And what I conflate that with is Nicole Kessinger. I don't think Chris Watts committed his crime because he was neglecting his family and because he wanted to be with Nicole Kessinger as the primary motive. So in the same way, I don't think this little boy's primary motive was because he was neglected, he went and climbed into this chimney. It's part of it, it's part of the dynamic, but it's a small part of it. So again, coming back to Chris Watts, the reason he committed the murders was because of financial issues and prestige issues and that kind of currency. And he was afraid he was going to lose his social currency if his, for example, wife stayed alive and she was going to perhaps let Kessinger know that she was pregnant with his child and ruin that relationship. So that was the treasure that he was trying to hold on to. And also the treasure of the house when it was sold, it could all be his rather than divvied up into alimony and all that kind of thing. So money was the primary motive, and the neglect and the affair and stuff. When I say neglect, I mean by having an affair with Kessinger, he was neglecting his family. But I don't think that was the primary reason he did what he did. I think it was money. And there's a big difference between the two. And so with Harley Dilly, I don't think it was the neglect from his family that's the primary reason that he did what he did and got himself into that situation. I think it was a factor, but I think the main reason was from him being preoccupied with the games he was playing, being preoccupied kind of with the Christmas and the time of the year, and that impulsivity associated with it, and the prestige of doing something brave and getting a kind of sense of personal prestige and social currency out of this little adventure that he was going on. And what happened? The fairy tale that he saw himself inside of became a nightmare that cost him his life. Exactly the same thing happened with Chris Watts. It's not being tuned into the real world. And that is something that all of us need to think about in our own lives as well. To what extent are we also chasing after rainbows? And that's about it. I'm not going to take it any further than that. I do think the timing of this event is very important. The last day of school the last, a few days before Christmas, in the same way that what happened with Chris Watts was also the timing of it, his wife returning when she did, and that was going to be the last day of his holiday, in a weird way. So I thought that was quite an interesting thing. In terms of Patreon, I've already uploaded the entire audiobook of Christmas Star, and from here on out I'll be uploading chapters of Silver Fox. And then you can also look at the Atkinson transcripts, and I'll also be talking about Thrive. And then I just want to thank everyone for your birthday wishes. It's actually not my birthday today. It's tomorrow, but I appreciate your birthday wishes. And then on this channel, I'll obviously be covering the Chris Watts Lifetime movie, letting you know what I found relevant, poignant, totally wrong or totally unbelievable, whatever it is. So I'll be doing an analysis on here. And then stay tuned for, or look out for further coverage of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. I think there's one episode left to look at, but I'm going to be doing a analysis basically, I think, in 2 or 3 parts. So look out for that. If you're interested in this coverage, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.